How do I react in a way wisely when I meet difficult situation? For example, my husband has a long time to stay with his work partner during 1 week, 4 days outside. Someone told me he is with her. They may be together. I don't know how to react to this. Could you give some suggestion? Thank you. Well, I think once you have this kind of suspicion, then it could just eat you up inside. It's like a poison. And once you have the suspicion, then you start to interpret everything or many things in a way which agrees with that suspicion. So, I don't really have so much time, as you know, to go into these questions. But my advice would be: it's better to speak to your husband, to find a right time and place, and say, this is what I've heard. Please, if it's not true, please don't be offended, but it's really upsetting me a lot. And can you put my mind at rest? And see what he says. But I think just not saying anything is not a good way to go. So it may or may not be true. It may be slander. It may be misunderstanding. But it may be true, and so be ready for whatever. But you really do need to talk about this. May I seek your advice on the journey towards purification of ego? I find it easier said than done. I have really good news for you on this. The ego doesn't exist, so you don't have to do all the work of purifying it. And it's seeing the transparency or the non-existence of ego, which is the practice. So we're assuming, we're grasping onto things and making them into self and looking at things personally. And so you just need to look a bit more closely about what's going on. So if you're acting with so when we say ego, often people are referring to conceit and someone who doesn't listen to anybody else and thinks they're always right, and sort of narcissistic tendencies. But rather than giving it this name of ego, go to the Pali. This was my advice and my own way is when these Western words, which come into common parlance and everybody uses, kind of easy to use, but there's pros and cons to using these words. And if we come back, there's no word for ego in Pali Canon or the way that the Buddha talked about defilement. So what would the Buddha would talk about conceit. And this is a defilement that arises and passes away, and we're looking at the impermanence of mental states and looking more clearly, then conceit becomes weaker. So this is a new word, deconstruct this idea of ego and look at it in terms of specific defilements and deal with each of those as they arise and pass away. And you say, I find it easier said than done. So this is a question for you. Is there anything in the world which is easier done than said? See if you can think of something. Surprise me. Dear Ajahn, how to continue practice rightly even if the body is breaking down? e.g. illness, terminal cancer. Anumodana for the kind teaching with Anjali and gratitude. Well, the practice of Dhamma is the abandonment of the unwholesome, the development of the wholesome, the purification of the mind. So the particular situation you find yourself in, whether it's health, temporary good health or bad health or severe bad health, it's still this body and mind. It's still the same challenge of how not to allow the mind to grasp onto phenomena as being me and mine. And so with physical illness, then your body is your Ajahn. This is your teacher. It's teaching you impermanence and dukkha and anatta. It's not the teacher you would have chosen for sure, but it's the teacher that you have. So be content with that and see how we can create suffering on top of the physical reality and how we can cease doing that. The mentioned to one or two people last couple of days this formula: pain multiplied by resistance to pain equals suffering. So if you have a lot of pain and a lot of resistance to suffering, you have a real lot of suffering. But if you have pain, a lot of pain and little resistance to pain, then much less suffering. You could have a small amount of pain and big resistance and suffer a lot more. But ideally, if you have, and this is the case of the great Arahants and Buddha himself, they experienced physical pain, but there was no resistance to the pain, and so there was no suffering. So this is the path of practice, how to be with pain without suffering, be with pain without resistance. And in the case of terminal illness, I think the word acceptance is probably the key word, that total acceptance of the situation, which is why I always sadut, what do you say in English? There's always could have this kind of resistance when people talk about their losing their battle against cancer and fighting cancer. It's like cancer is just you, it's your body, it's just your reality. You know, it doesn't have to make goodies and baddies and have wars and battles. So just accept. It's like this, in the words of Ajahn Sumedho, but you do the treatments, you do what you can to recover, but you recognize that maybe you won't recover. I'm reminded of a situation where I went to visit a student. She was a teacher, lecturer, university in Bangkok, in her 30s, maybe early 40s, and was in the last stage of cancer. But the family were in complete denial. Nobody was allowed to use the word cancer. And so they invited me to visit. And so this poor woman is laying on the hospital bed, skeleton basically, but with huge abdomen, swollen abdomen. And the family wants a blessing for a daughter to get better and go to speak with the woman herself. And she's saying that if she gets better, when she gets better, she wants to be become a nun for a few months and practice the Dhamma and so on. So, you know, how to speak to someone in this situation, because it's the writer that the family wants us to deny to the very last minute what's going on here. Well, I don't have the authority to destroy that. So the words I spoke to the woman is like, whatever illness we have, whether it's a serious illness or a more mild illness, it's not sure thing. We can get better, and we all want to get better, of course, but we always have to prepare for the unexpected or the unwanted. And as Buddhist practitioner, we prepare for, one, for getting better, and two, for not getting better. So you have to be able to include that possibility in your mind that you're not going to get better. Just as you want to get better, and maybe you'll get better, but maybe you won't. And so don't just look on one side of the situation. So this was, the way of talking to someone who doesn't want to face up to the truth, but just by referring to the impermanence and uncertainty of life. So you have a terminal illness, maybe it will be terminal, maybe it won't, but be prepared and cherish the time that you have and use it well. There was a young Muslim woman in England with a Thai Buddhist friend. She's Thai Muslim woman with a Thai Buddhist friend. She had cancer, and a friend took her to Chithurst. She learned how to meditate and made a miraculous recovery from cancer. And she'd made a vow that if she recovered, she'd become a nun. So she did become a nun. And I went to visit England when she was a nun. And there'd been a lot of sort of whispering about this. Wow, she has incredible samadhi. She's so inspiring. And so I said hello and said, how are you? And how's your practice? And she said, Ajahn, ever since I recovered from cancer, my practice has been terrible. I don't know whether this is the right thing to say, but, I kind of feel some nostalgia for my cancer. One part of me wishes I had cancer again. Even if something so awful as a terminal illness, there are advantages to it. At least there are in the terms of Dhamma practice. So this is it. This is what you have. This is your raw materials. This is what you have to work with. So you do the best you can. Dear Ajahn. So many of the questions I get are sort of variations on a theme. So I really like it when I get an unusual question. So thank you. So this question is, will chanting with my pet chicken or meditating with them help them have a better rebirth? I'm not sure. But it is said by those who know that although it's incredibly difficult for an animal to take a higher rebirth, that the causal factors which will help that, or to create supporting factors for that to happen sometime in the future, is the kindness and close contact with good human beings. So, yes, why not? I think it's a really admirable thought and intention. And I really can't guarantee, but I think, if your chicken knows how to chant, and or if your chicken can sit cross-legged, then why not? What's your advice on dealing with hostility, such as jealousy? Thanks. So, when we do good things, then we generally have this idea of fairness or proportionality, or the idea that when you do a good thing, you should be praised for it, basically, even if you don't want the praise, and even kind of avoid, like I said, putting the gold leaf on the back of the Buddha. You still feel that it's praiseworthy. So the reflection that I would like to give you is, whenever you do a good thing, there are going to be 5 kinds of reaction. This is not sutta, this is me, okay? There might be more. So first is genuine praise. Okay, people see that anumodana and they really feel uplifted and inspired by a good thing you've done. Second is false praise, flattery. Somebody praises you because they want something from you. Third is indifference. People don't see what all the fuss is about. Fourth is jealousy. Fifth is aversion. Aversion because maybe you've shown somebody up, or your goodness means that they make some kind of loss, or put in some kind of difficult situation, whatever. So if we bear this in mind, whenever we do a good thing, you're prepared, so it's like you group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4, group 5, and you do a good thing, and somebody's jealous, and you say, oh, group 4 is here today, a bit of group 4. Somebody comes and says, oh, it's just so inspiring, it's uplifting. It's, oh, group 1. So, yeah, it's just tamada. It's just normal. This is what happens. This is how unenlightened people respond to goodness, and respond to it with genuine praise, false praise, indifference, jealousy, and aversion. That's just the way the world is. So, if I guess an extra piece of advice is, if someone is jealous, then just look over your conduct and to see if you've made yourself a target unnecessarily in the way that you've behaved, or things that you said, and maybe that a little bit more care in the way that you do good things in the world. Tanajan, how does one know if a spiritual teacher is the best for an individual? Well, another question is, how does the spiritual teacher know if the individual is best for a student? You see, well, you don't know, you see. I would, some red flags, let's say, like if the Buddha himself, let's go back to the sutta, and the Buddha says, you should look at the Buddha, you should study me and observe me, and see whether I ever act or speak or express in any way that is indicative of greed. Do I ever act or speak in any way as indicative of anger and aversion? Do I ever act and speak in any ways which are indicative of delusion, confusion? So this is how your faith in the Tathagata will be very strong. So again, this kind of revolutionary teaching for a spiritual leader. He said that don't just put your faith in me too easily. You don't throw out your critical faculty. It's quite all right. But so red flags. If a teacher acts in ways, speaks in ways which seem to be indicative of greed or hatred or delusion, then there's something to be wary of. For monastic teachers, then know some of the important rules. One of the most important rules for a monastic is that he should never be alone with a woman under any circumstances. And if a monk is inviting you or consenting to spending time alone, out of sight, out of hearing of other people, then you can know that at the very least that monk has no respect for his training rules, or is being very heedless. So the three, in any kind of organization, spiritual or worldly, what are the three things, that come up? It's like sex, power, and money. Those are always the downfalls. So with a celibate monk teacher, then he has all these boundaries and things that you respect. And if he doesn't respect them, then keep away. Then there is power. How does that teacher exercise the power and authority that he has or she has over others? Does it take advantage of others using that authority that he or she has? To what extent does that teacher try to promote like a personality cult, and for faith and devotion to be paid to him or her as an individual? The key teaching in the suttas with regard to this issue is when Mahapajapati, the Buddha's stepmother, aunt, going to offer him a robe, and he refuses to accept the robe, and he says, "You offer it to the sangha." And she wants the merit, she won't offer to the Buddha. She thinks it's more merit, and the Buddha says, offering to the sangha is always more meritorious than offering to an individual, even the Buddha himself. So this is one of a number of teachings which really reinforce this important point that we take refuge in the sangha, not in charismatic individuals. There will always be charismatic individuals. Some teachers are extremely charismatic. Ajahn Chah's obvious example. Other teachers, highly attained teachers, not very charismatic at all. It's not like enlightenment equals superhuman charisma. And so not to take that as a measure of whether it's a great teacher or not, how charismatic or how articulate they are. But observe to what extent how they exercise the power they have, both institutional power, psychological power, authority. And that's a good indication of how trustworthy they are. And thirdly, this coarse one of money, if constantly making demands and making you feel that a good student should cough up and should provide money. If you see teachers who are giving a lot of preferential treatment and time and to people who make big donations, and there's a Buddhist monastery institution in Thailand which notorious, and Thai people will know about it, and they set up with a business model to try to get the sort of the high worth individuals into the temple and to make a big fuss of them, and they'd have special food, and they wouldn't eat in the kitchen with everyone else, and they'd have special interviews with the abbot, which are not accessible. So that there's this sense that you go up the ladder, the more money you offer, and the more. And so this is a Buddhist monastery based on very non-Buddhist principles, and very popular it was too. still around to this day, and even in the Western world. So, yeah, sex, money, power, these kind of basic things. And does he or she know what they're talking about? It's the obvious one. Whether sometimes it's like a chemical reaction thing. Like when I first came to Thailand, before I went to Boon, I went up to spend a few days in Wapamantad at Luang Mahabua's monastery. And everyone gave me such a warm welcome. The Western Sangha there was so kind to me. And Luang Mahabua was such an inspiring master. And yet I didn't feel any kind of heart connection. You know, I sort of recognized, wow, I really believe I'm living, I'm practicing in a monastery with an Arahant teacher. And yet I didn't feel that I really wanted to stay there. And then when I met Ajahn Chah, it's just, this is it. I want to spend the rest of my life here. So it's not always like a rational checkbox, ticking off the points on a checkbox. Sometimes it's an emotional, immediate kind of connection that you feel. Ajahn, how to do vipassana in meditation? Okay, another big question. There are two aspects to meditation. There's the calming, steadying, clarifying side of meditation, and then there is the investigation, penetration of the way things are. So it's called samatha and vipassana, calm and insight. Our tradition, Ajahn Chah tradition, emphasizes the unity and the relationship between these two aspects of meditation or aspects of mind, rather than seeing them as different kinds of meditation. The analogy is of an axe. You're going to cut with an axe. You need the axe to be sufficiently heavy and sufficiently sharp. And so the heaviness of the axe is compared to samatha, and the sharpness of the axe is vipassana. Sharpness and no weight, then you won't cut very deeply. Weight and no sharpness, then you won't cut at all. So the samatha is all the ways in which we prepare the mind, where we imbue the mind with the necessary stability, clarity, flexibility, brightness, happiness, which is needed to look at the three characteristics. So with the looking, the vipassana is not taking a specific object of meditation. It's the three characteristics, and it could be these three characteristics, again, are different aspects of one thing, and they both lead, any one of them leads to confluence where all three are revealed. The mind needs to be in a state where it is not reacting instinctively to phenomena with moving towards or moving away. So this is the samadhi, and this is what the samadhi gives us. Then simply watching, knowing, arising and passing away. This is probably the most direct and effective means. So thoughts, emotions, feelings, sounds, whatever the phenomena, we're not looking at the phenomena itself, we're looking at this arising and passing away. So after listening to the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, Venerable Anya Kondanya realizes stream entry, the first enlightened disciple, and he summarizes his knowledge, his understanding, which led to stream entry, is that whatever is the nature to arise is the nature to pass away. So that's the key. So we can all say, oh yeah, we see things arising, passing away, changing all the time. That's pretty mundane. What's that got to do with enlightenment? But it's seeing. It's not it's not that there's some profound, incredibly difficult intellectual concept. It's just seeing this most basic aspect, element, characteristic of our life with a mind which is sufficiently cultivated, developed, sensitive to be able to really absorb its implications. It's vipassana. When can you do vipassana? When you feel that your mind is reasonably calm, as to say, no hindrances. There is maybe some thought or some. You may be able to hear things going on, but you're not drawn towards them. Ajahn Chah compared it to a chicken. This may be the chicken who chants and meditates. I don't know, but it's a chicken in a coop, and it can move around in the chicken coop, but no further. And so this is the idea of there is a certain amount of movement in the mind, but the movement is not impacting on the mind. So it's data for vipassana, in other words. If you feel that your mind, or you want to give it a try, then you put down the breath or your meditation object and you turn to this awareness of arising and passing away. And if you can be aware of arising and passing away without the mind grasping on to the phenomena, then carry on. If you find after a short time that the mind is getting stuck on the phenomena, is pulling it towards, or you're pushing it away, it means that you don't have the necessary foundation. And so go back to your object. So we don't have to talk about this stage and that stage. It's experiential. Can you do it? If you can, then carry on. If you can't, then go back a step and go back to the breath. The interconnectedness of causality in paticca samuppada is very deep and interesting. Would Lumpur provide guidance on how to use it as a tool during formal meditation and daily life situation? I'll repeat or recap my comment yesterday, which is in practical means then we focus on this link between Vedana and Tanha, the ability to be present at sense contact, aware of Vedana as Vedana without allowing Vedana to cause or to condition the arising of Tanha. As far as the intellectual investigation, contemplation of the different links, then that can form a preliminary discursive meditation, a training of the mind. If you remember yesterday, I said we can give, when the mind's very active and it wants to think and just to go to the breath or a non-thinking object, it's just too much, a step too far, then we can draw a box and say, okay, think within this box on this particular theme in a systematic way, and just sort of very skillfully work through that kind of thinking energy that's there. And so taking up the paticca samuppada as a theme and reflecting on it and contemplating the different links, that can fulfill that function as a preliminary discursive meditation. Okay. My mind and heart and body sometimes get tired and exhausted from typhoons of people being kind. Well, that's not a bad typhoon. And having empathy, yet need to deliver business result. I'm not sure I understand that. Often I check my good intention, but I speak direct and perhaps insensitive to them. 1, should I be worried? 2, how to improve? 3, any mantra? I think a lot of people would be rather jealous of you having typhoons of people being kind to you. Not such a bad dilemma, is it? But yeah, it can be tiresome. You have to create some boundaries and keep reminding yourself where this is coming from. You know, each person, they don't feel themselves as part of a typhoon. They're coming out of their own, the goodness of their heart and their concern for you and empathy with you. I'm not sure I understand what business result means here. Anyway, I'll skip that. So keep coming back to their intention, their good intention, and appreciate that. And bring a lot of joy. Be mindful. Don't speak. Don't say anything until you're sure that it's coming from a good and wholesome place. If you notice and you're experiencing some irritation or tiredness or this is all too much, then recognize that and realize that that's an indication that you have to be especially careful of your speech. And just a short thank you is good. So yeah, that's the mantra. Thank you. Dearest Ajahn, my dad has been sick and aged as normal being. I understand one day will be his last. As now what a child could do to make it easier for him to deal with sickness and prepare for the RIP. Yeah, don't have too much of an agenda here, even if it's a very kind. Let's go back to the previous question, maybe. And what does your dad really want, and what does he enjoy, and how can you help with that? So, if you're living in a city, and so someone gets old and they tend to be, their life become more narrow and circumscribed. Well, obviously one of the nice things to do is just to drive out into the countryside or go out and spend a weekend out of the city in a fresh new place. Maybe you're doing this already, but just think something that comes to mind. And is your father a Buddhist? Is your father any interest in meditation or Buddhist teachings? If so, then that's wonderful. Maybe you can make merit or go to visit a monk and get some teaching, or basically just what small things you can do. It doesn't have to be big things. If you're not living together in the same place, you're away. I think what 2 things parents need to hear from their children is 1, that you love them, and 2, that you don't forget them. Those are the 2 things that parents fear. Children don't love them, children forget them. So put your parents' mind to rest with these things, not just a one-off, once a year, every day, every few days. Don't have to say it so much, but show it, be in touch. Small acts of kindness. I was discovered some years ago, this is quite some time ago now, they had this new thing in supermarkets in UK, I suppose everywhere, where you could shop online and then and order things online and then send them, and then they would send them to people's front doors. Okay, I guess it's everybody knows this now, but it's kind of there was a time when this was a new and exciting development. And so I sit with lay supporter and chew all these things my mum likes to eat and enjoys, and then next day, there's a knock on the door and she's got this big hamper, and you can do stuff like that. It's not so difficult, is it? But spending time is the major gift, and being patient. And old people can, be a test of patience. And, when they go over and over and over the same things again, that's your test, you see. So I have a tip. You look on it as like chanting. So, if you were to chant with your parent, and they would say, Iti piso bhagava, you would say, oh, not this one again. We just chanted that yesterday, But no, you said, this is a chant, that time when we did this and we did that. And yeah, it's a chant. It's not, if you want some kind of exchange of information, and, that's not what this is about. But you're spending some warm quality time, and you just enjoy it. You don't need it to go anywhere. You know where it goes. Just like iti piso ends. You know where it ends. And so changing your whole idea about this sort of repetitive stories and anecdotes from elderly people. Give your time. Give your love. Yeah, it's a good thing to do. Ajahn, how to nibbana in this lifetime? Yeah, practice a lot. Do it a lot. Whether or not you'll realize nibbana in this lifetime, that's questionable. Maybe, I hope you do. But at least be confident that you're on the path to nibbana. Let's go along that path as far as you can. But don't, to refer to previous teaching of like craving and chanda, wholesome and unwholesome desire. Unwholesome desire, cause of suffering, is focused on the result, and chanda, wholesome desire, is focused on the process. So if it's too much, how can I realize nibbana? When will I realize nibbana? And very easily that slips into craving, and it's an obstacle. But how can I create the conditions? What do I need to do today to create optimum conditions for progress on the path to nibbana? This is wholesome, and this will definitely lead you further along the way. Lots of good questions. And okay, just do this one first. What should one do at the point of death for a good rebirth? I heard in the Tawatingsa heaven, one can still continue to practice over there. If one has yet to enter the stream, how does one get there, please? Okay. So there is a teaching which is kind of very well known these days, that the next life is conditioned initially by the last mind moment, the last consciousness before death. And the analogy is, or the example given of a barn with many cows in the barn, many big ones, but whichever cow is next to the door will be the first one out, even if it's a small calf rather than a big cow. So the fact that it's next to the door means it'll be first out. Similarly, whatever mind moment is present at the last breath will be the first one next lifetime. So in Thailand, last few years, there's been a lot of interest in end-of-life care, Buddhist end-of-life care, how to best look after our elders at the end of their life, and the retreats and workshops. And I think it's a really good and inspiring development. Nevertheless, I feel that there's been perhaps too much emphasis on this last moment, and it's forgetting or overlooking the fact that if the last moment is at odds with, it's in conflict with all the karma that's been created throughout one's life, then the karmic result is very short-lived. It doesn't eradicate all of the good karma that you've made before that. And so the main thing is to be making good karma, abandoning the unwholesome, developing the wholesome, purifying the mind day by day. And so at the end of life, then you are in the best possible position. But even if there should be like a blip in your mind and an unwholesome, don't be afraid of that. Don't think that's like suddenly going to wipe out all the good karma that you've created, because you kind of lose it right at the end of life. That's not really how it works. Heard in the Tawa things to heaven, and still practice. Yes, there are in heaven realms, there are devas with Arya, Pukala devas, and devas with right view, and devas that teach the Dhamma. But it's very rare, and we can see even in this human realm, when you're really very comfortable, how the intensity of your practice tends to fall off. So, needless to say, if you're in an environment where the pleasure and the comfort is much in excess of what we know here, then how much more likely it is that you'll become heedless with your practice, even if there are, as they say, some wise spiritual teachers amongst the devas. So there's a sutta in Tipitaka where some devas, just before they die, there are these certain indications. Devas have come to the end of their time. Flowers start to wither, and there's an odor to their bodies. There's indications. And in this one particular sutta, there's two devas find out that they're about to leave the deva realm, and they're going to be born as humans in the human realm. And they're overjoyed. So let's have a deva party. It's like good news. We're going to be born in human realm where we can really get down to our Dhamma practice. So, this is quite a good place to be if you want to practice. Sila, Samadhi, Panya, can they be interchangeable within the Buddha's education system? Can Sila take the back seat? Well, it can. Yes, it can be the backseat driver even. This is a holistic system, meaning that at any stage, any phase of practice, all three of these elements are present. Simply that one will be in the foreground and the other two in playing supporting roles. And so when Sila is to the foreground, you have the Samadhi training and the Panya training supporting it. So please remember that the word samadhi in sila, samadhi, panya doesn't mean like sama samadhi. It's a term for the training of the heart, citta pavana. So it's a much wider, broader term than samadhi might indicate. So with sila, to begin with, you need to have the wisdom, at least, to see the suffering and the unsatisfactoriness of breaking precepts. You have to have the wisdom to see the importance and the value of keeping precepts. So without that basic right view and understanding and wisdom, you wouldn't take on the precepts in the first place. To keep the precepts well, then you need mindfulness and patience and loving kindness and all kinds of other virtues which you cultivate in the samadhi group. So when sila is to the fore, then there are wisdom elements and samadhi elements supporting. When samadhi, the training of the heart, is to the fore, then you're reliant on the lack of remorse about one's actions, guilt about one's past actions, as a sense of self-respect, and friendship with oneself, which is dependent upon good sila. And the Buddha once said there's no jhana or there's no samadhi without wisdom, no wisdom without samadhi. So dealing with the 5 hindrances, you can't just bulldoze your way through those. You need intelligence and you need strategy and skillful means. And that's the wisdom factor present in the samadhi section. With the panya, as I said, you need that foundation of sila, and you need the equanimity, stability, clarity, brightness, happiness, contentedness, flexibility of samadhi to allow wisdom to do its job most effectively. So many good questions. We're kind of running out of time. Dear Ajahn, I find it hard to get back to the normal momentum of working life after a retreat. The analytical mind slows down, but it is needed at work. In fact, I start to miss the retreat monastery so much so that sometimes the sound of chanting rings in my ears for days. I know these are just habits of the mind. Could put Ajahn advice me, please. This part of the challenge of this way of practice, modern way of practice of alternating periods of work with periods of retreat. And when you come on a retreat, then you bring the world with you to a certain degree. And just as when you go back to the world, the sound of chanting rings in your ears when you come to retreat, then there are all kinds of worldly things ringing in your ears for some time too. But that's just part of it. It's like this. And I think overall, taking time off and going on retreat, the pros outweigh the cons. But recognizing them and not being discouraged by them or irritated by them, so it's just like an echo. So when you come to a retreat, there's like the worldly echoes, and then they gradually fade out, and you come on into the world, and the spiritual echoes gradually fade out. But if you are the difference being that you are maintaining your practice evening and morning and evening, and trying to maintain mindfulness throughout the day, that you are learning more and more effectively how to integrate what you learn in retreats into daily life. And mentioned a number of times to just really observe to the extent within applying meditation techniques that we're learning life skills that are applicable in daily life. And when you notice that kind of how what you're doing in a retreat feeds into and nourishes and uplifts what you're doing in the world, then that sense of conflict between them or gap between them starts to narrow. Is karma really just intention? What if I did something such as accidentally stepping over a relic? Is there anything to worry about? Well, I'd worry, well, what kind of situation would you be in where you would step over a relic? I mean, so we say, my question would be is, how did I get here? The Buddha said very plainly, karma is intention. And that's the essence of karma. And it is the most important thing to remember about karma, because so often people feel guilty about situations in which somebody's hurt or something bad happens and they were involved in some way, sometimes quite a tangential way. And again, this is very much, I feel, influence of Western culture, in which there's this kind of championing of guilt. Like in the West, often feeling guilty is the sign of a virtuous person. So, like if you're in a novel or a movie or something, a movie particularly, you need quick brush strokes. You want to establish whether someone is like a hero, or a goodie or a baddie, so on the white side or the black side. And in American movies, it's very noticeable that one of the ways in which the writers of the screenplay establish someone as being someone you want to root for is they feel guilty about something. And I used to think, what a shame. He seemed quite a nice guy. Why is he so stupid to feel guilty about something he had no, so you're involved in an accident, somebody dies, and it's through no fault of this person, and yet they still feel guilty. And you're being encouraged to think this means this is a really good person because he's willing to feel guilty about things. And as a Buddhist, if you feel guilty over something in which you had no intention, you're not responsible for. It's foolishness, it's delusion, it's harming yourself unnecessarily. It's not virtuous at all. So ethical questions become to intention again and again. There are one or two outlying issues. One, in the monk's discipline, there are certain rules out of a huge number of rules which are not intentional, which call sachitika. They're called achitika rules. So if I was to pick this up, I'm thinking it's water, but actually somebody's put some vodka in here, and I go, that's not water, and I'd spit it out. But I would have broken my precept, even though I had no intention. And the reason being that I'm not careful enough about what things go into my mouth. So here there's an expectation of a certain level of vigilance and care, and lacking that, then as a monk, one's considered to have broken a precept. But it's very much in the minority. But an example that comes up in the world a lot, let's say someone drinks alcohol and then drives, and then is involved in an accident and injures someone or even maybe kills somebody. Now you say, well, did they have the intention to run somebody over? Well, obviously, we would think not. But they did have the intention to drink alcohol, knowing that if they drove a car, they would be unable to maintain proper control of the steering wheel and have the reflexes that they would need to avoid danger or avoid being dangerous to others. So here is like a step back from what was the intention in that in that action, the action of drinking alcohol and then driving under the influence of alcohol. Even though you could argue that there was an absence of the intention to kill that person. And this is reflected in legal codes, isn't it, around the world, at different levels of murder and first degree and second degree and manslaughter and involuntary manslaughter and so on and so forth. Is it possible for jhana to arise during walking meditation? I'm not sure if it's possible because it is really difficult to have mindfulness of a single object during walking. Yes, I meant to say something this morning when I was talking about walking meditation, and that is that most monks and nuns who have walked their own walking meditation path by the kuti will also have a little seat. And if the meditator reaches a point where the mind feels it's going into samadhi, then some meditators will just stand and they can go into a deep state of samadhi in standing posture. But more often the monk or the nun or the meditator at that point will go and sit down and then continue in the sitting posture. There's a story of Lumpu Chop who could go into samadhi very easily, and he was on his walking path in the jungle, and he walked and he saw a tiger at the end of his footpath, and then he looked behind him and there was a tiger at the other end. So he just stood there and went into samadhi, and then when he came out of samadhi some hours later, the two tigers had gone. So that's one way of dealing with tigers at either end of your walking path. Just a tip. Okay, I think we're out of time. Ajahn, how to make up my mind with the person who always take advantage from us? Thank you. So the Buddha's teaching is Dhamma Vinaya teaching. It's not just Dhamma. It's Dhamma and Vinaya. And Vinaya does not refer only to the monastic code of discipline. It refers to all the ways in which we create conducive conditions in the world around us. So it includes things like laws of the land, regulations, agreements, conventions, cultural forms, all the ways in which we try to make it easier to follow the path of Dhamma and more difficult to follow in the opposite path. So the Vinaya par excellence is the monastic code of discipline, because here the Buddha had complete freedom to create an institution and to create all of the rules and regulations and conventions himself, which would reflect the goal of the Buddhist training and education. Whereas in the world, of course, much more limited opportunity to do that. Even in a Buddhist culture, there are so many different power groups and vested interests and so on and so forth. Nevertheless, when we have a problem in our life, we should reflect that this may be essentially a Dhamma problem, or it may be more likely or more essentially a Vinaya problem. So one of the misunderstandings, Buddhism amongst the Buddhists is, as a Buddhist, you just got to make your peace with the world. Don't make a fuss. So living in an unjust situation or people taking advantage of you, then just tamjai, just learn how to come to terms with it. Don't make a fuss. But that's not at all what the Buddha taught. He taught Dhamma Vinaya. And in a case, let's say you're quite an adept meditator, you know how to let go of things quite well. And so you're going to your office and somebody acts in an objectionable way, obnoxious behavior. So you're practicing, you're mindful, and you let it go. And you can do that. And you go, that's getting quite good at this, So, and then the next day, this person acts the same way, maybe even more obnoxious. So you let go, let go, let go. And you can do it. Maybe you can do it. Who knows? But even if you can do it, I don't think that that's really the correct Buddhist response, because this isn't essentially your problem here. I mean, there's it's your response to the problem is something you take responsibility for, but this person is behaving in a way which is causing disturbance and disruption to the community, and as someone who's disrespecting their fellows, someone who is breaking agreements and so on. And so if you simply put up with or try to make some peace with this person's behavior, you are in a way supporting it. This is what you find in what's called dysfunctional families, where nobody talks about the alcohol problem or the problem, and they end up in a roundabout way supporting it and enabling it. You become enablers. So when people behave badly, don't think that as a Buddhist you just try to be at peace with it and hope it'll just go away, because you may well become an enabler, and that person is creating bad karma, and they're going to receive the fruits of that bad karma. So there's some compassion for them also. So in certain cases, you say, well, what needs to be done about this? Is there anything that can be done? What's the most skillful thing to be done? So look at both sides. Sometimes you might be in a position where there's absolutely nothing that you can do, and you just have to be patient. That's certainly possible. But there are also cases where you need to take a more proactive approach and deal with the Vinaya side and the community side and the precept side and the social harmony side of things, because this is also part of our practice. So one more. Let me see. Take a round. Don't know which one to choose. Just take the top one, okay. Yesterday, Ajahn talked about keeping the 5 precepts well. What about euthanasia or stopping life support? Intention of letting the sick, pets to suffer, or is the wish of the sick? Okay, so 5 precepts, or let's say the first precept, which is the one being referred to here, in the monastic discipline, their rules are grouped into different categories, and the first group we call the parajikas, and these are if a monk commits one of these offences, the moment they commit the offence, they're automatically no longer a monk, even if they're still wearing their robes, and people still think that they're monks. They're no longer monks. And these four rules are sexual intercourse, stealing, killing human being, and falsely claiming states of supernormal attainments. In the third rule, in the explanation of the rule, so the Vinaya textbooks are like law books. They're very, very complex and refined with all possible permutations. But in that, if a monk suggests, encourages someone to take life, then they would be parajika. That would be considered equivalent to killing someone oneself. One would be expelled from the monkhood. So if a monk was to promote, encourage euthanasia, then that would be the end of their monastic life. Similarly, if a monk was to encourage, promote abortion, that would also be considered taking life. So a monk is obviously not allowed not to promote euthanasia, but at the same time, the Buddhist approach is not that this is wrong, this is evil, you shouldn't do this. But what the Buddhist monk can say is, the Buddha says this is bad karma, and before you take such a step, you should recognize that. So whether it's euthanasia or abortion, you should really give this serious thought and think about it a long time and discuss it with all the involved parties and wise people. And only when you are, and then when you are really sure what you want to do, then you make your decision and take the responsibility. So this is how we look at these precepts. So, and with the suffering of others, that's terrible, and often we think we'd prefer to take the suffering on ourselves rather than on our loved one. That our loved ones should be free of it, but we can't do that. But with animals also, there is this point that it's our own fear of pain and inability to be in the presence of pain, which is a factor also. It's not purely compassion. And we need to be honest about that and face up to that. So with the animal's pain, again, the Buddhist thing is not don't do it. If you do it, drop into hell or something like that. You should be punished and sent to jail if you do such things, saying, this is bad karma for sure, but you need to weigh it up and weigh up how you see the pros and cons and make your decision accordingly. With life support system, again, really encouraging people to make living wills and make your wishes regarding this situation where you're on life support system. So sometimes, just something happens suddenly and you're in that position and unable to communicate your wishes. And so letting it be well known and accepted and acknowledged by those around you will reduce this problem significantly. Okay, time's up. Sorry, not all the people whose questions I couldn't answer, and next time we have to have another time.